got married in February '68, moved into our house in September '68, and Paul was born the following September in '69. So he turned 2 in September, and this was Christmas. We started to notice him staring and vomiting. He'd vomit without any reason. So anyway, we went to the Children's Hospital, and we ended up going in 3 or 4 times because they kept saying I was neurotic, there was nothing wrong with him. And so we kept going home, and anyway, eventually when we took him in, he was dehydrated. They took him up and he had a brain tumour. So, yeah, so our life turned upside down. Originally we thought that perhaps he was just the effects of the operation, and that you know, he would pick up. We didn't realise at that stage about his disability. But yeah, Paul really didn't say any new word. From the words he was saying at 2 years of age when he got sick was virtually his vocabulary until he got to about 5.
We didn't think it changed our lives. Everybody else thought it did, but we just took it on as parents, as our responsibility, and I guess it really didn't change our lives at the beginning because we had no other children, and we just went along with the way things were until our next child came along. And then we found that it was getting a little bit difficult. As they started to grow up, we realised that, and the children realised that Paul was different, he couldn't talk, and they had to accept it.
Having a disabled child really equates to nearly having another one. You know, I always felt that I probably, you know, I really felt my life would have been easier if I'd had 5 or 6 children than 3 and Paul, through no fault of Paul, but it's just, yeah. And the worries there with Paul all the time. I mean, they told that was probably the biggest thing that changed our lives. They virtually told us, you know, when nobody knew what was going to happen, and they said, well, you know, if he ever hits his head and goes unconscious, you know, that's probably it. Or if he comes in contact with chickenpox, we reckon, you know, it'll get to the shunt, and that'll be it. So we had all these scenarios. So we had to very early on make the decision whether we kept him in cotton wool, and we thought about it, you know, whether we just, you know, treated him differently, or whether we let him go. And we came to the conclusion that he had to live no matter how long we had with us, and he deserved a normal childhood. So to Paul, the best of Paul's ability, he did everything that the other children did. Paul got to about 10, and we have always endeavoured to keep Paul, as we said, you know, because there was a lot of children. There were 19 children in the street. You know, there were a lot of children in the street. So we didn't want Paul to stand out to still really believe in Father Christmas when everybody else that was 10 didn't believe in Father Christmas. So Peter decided this particular day to that he would handle it, that I had the wrong approach altogether. So he sent the other kids packing, and he sat in the kitchen with Paul, and he sat down and he very carefully explained to Paul that, you know, Mum goes shopping, and Mum, we put the presents and everything about Santa and everything that he needed to know. But he was not to tell his little brothers and sisters, because that's what big brothers do. They don't tell their little brothers and sisters. So he worded him all up beautifully. And then he said to Paul, he waited a minute, and he said to Paul, all right, he said, now you've got to tell me, he said, who puts the Christmas presents under the Christmas tree? And Paul looked at him and he went, the Easter Bunny. Well, yeah, our concerns are that, you know, we want Paul to outlive us, but I really don't want him to live in anything that's being offered at the moment. I don't think that he would develop and survive in a CRU with 5 other disabled people. I'm really, really worried. I think that the government owes carers something. I think that if you care 24/7 for 40, 50 and sometimes 60 years, as some of the people do, if you've done that all your life and saved the government, I think it's at the moment it's $120,000 a year to keep somebody in accommodation. I think that every carer has got the right to say, to be able to plan for the future of their children the way they want to do it, because we've got ideas but nobody will listen to you. We should be able to sit down now and plan. You should just be able to ring up DHS and say, right, we don't need help at the moment, but we need to plan for the future. Let's put a plan together for Paul. Let's start it in process so that when the time comes that we think that we're no longer through sickness or death or any other reason that we are unable to continue to care for him, that we just put our hand up and say, you know, we need help now, and it should be automatic. You shouldn't have to beg. You shouldn't have to relinquish, which is what most people do. A number of people in our support group have had to relinquish, and that is just so cruel to do that to anybody who's given up their life.
What do you mean by relinquish?
Well, relinquish means that when people care, and they're usually people who have sons and daughters with very high needs, so they get to the stage where they're physically and mentally worn out, absolutely worn out, and they're being offered, you know, 1 night or 2 nights a month's rest if they're lucky, maybe 10 hours a week for council help or something like that, and yet they're on call. Some of them are on call during the night. They get up several times during the night all their life to care for people. So they get so desperate and so tired of asking for help that they eventually make their horrible decision, and most of them have a breakdown over it or close to it. They make the decision that they take their child to the respite and then they don't pick them up.
Lynn and I, when we're discussing things, and she was talking about when Paul grows up and he outlives us, we're trying to organise things from when we pass away. And Lynn and I, between ourselves, strictly between ourselves, have said once or twice to ourselves that it would be, for Paul's sake, and this sounds very hard, if Paul passed away before we passed away, because as Lynn said, we don't know where he's going to end up, how he's going to end up, or we know how he's going to end up. He's going to end up very quiet as a vegetable, and he talks a lot now and he's happy now, but he wouldn't be in a few years. It'd only take a year or not even that for him to just drop down to nothing. So just between ourselves, we've thought it would be, sounds a very hard thing, but a better way of things for Paul to pass away before we do.